because, like I said, the premise of Odinani that I have observed and I say is the opposite that's preached in Christianity. Because Christianity, the doctrine of the original sin, means that you are already soiled when you come into this planet, and this is you can't argue with this. This is their own doctrine. The doctrine of Christianity is that people are already soiled. They're already messed up when they come into the world. The premise of Odinani is the opposite, which is you're already whole.
Onyemobi, what's going on?
I am fine. How about yourself?
I'm good, man. I'm good. So as I'm doing this interview series, I wanted to make sure that you were one of the people that I spoke to. You've been a huge inspiration to me, teacher. I consider you somebody that definitely got me going as far as action and putting a lot of things that were in my head, you know, to action. So as much as this is kind of, you know, as much as this is me just kind of exploring my personal curiosity about what you do, this is also a way of showing honor and respect to the people that I believe are doing things that are noteworthy and beneficial to what we're doing as a culture. So thank you very much for being here. I wanted to start by asking you, what is the TheIgboCyberShrine and how did it come to be?
All right. Well, thank you for having me on. The TheIgboCyberShrine is, well, the name explains it all. It's supposed to be a centralized place where you can learn about Igbo spirituality, but not just from one perspective. It's supposed to be from a multiple points of view. So I am the person who founded it, but when I describe it, especially to people who've written for it, I say this is our site. It's not my site. This is our site, because this is something that's supposed to really be for the people. It's not a promotion of me. Gotcha. It's for the people. And it came about because a couple of years ago, my brother and I used to have a blog talk radio show, Igbo Corner Radio. And I mean, it was actually pretty good, at least in my opinion. We touched on a lot of different topics, both contemporary and you know, historical. So we had different authors on. We had practitioners of Odinani or variants of Odinani, and it was also had debates. But over time, I think really more so than anything, we were just ahead of our time. I think if we did it today, it would be booming.
Oh, but, yeah.
This was over 10 years ago.
Okay, wow.
Like, and the audience just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. And so once we kind of saw the audience dwindle, we basically shut it down. But, you know, I still had the interest in our culture and whatnot. So anyway, to make a long story short, the genesis of TheIgboCyberShrine, from there, that desire, that thirst to talk and you know, share about Odinani and not just Odinani, us Igbo people, our story, who we are. The genesis of TheIgboCyberShrine came actually in a dream that I had, and in the dream I saw a figure which I recognize as Ani. Ani is the earth, well, actually the land spirit. Not actually, you know, a lot of people mistake Ani and Uwa. Ani is the land spirit. Uwa is actually the earth spirit. There's a difference, right? So I saw Ani, which is the land spirit, right? The spirit of the land itself. I saw her and she was giving me a lesson. And this lesson was, her symbol was what people call the diamond shape, right? You can make it like, you know, a diamond. I think it may be also called the name is escaping me right now, but it's a four.
I'd be the last person to ask about geometry.
Losange, or Losange, whatever you want to call it. That was her symbol, and she explained this to me. I woke up and I didn't remember my dream, but sitting in class, right? I was sitting in class, bored out of my mind. I studied engineering, by the way. I had 2 degrees. One of them was engineering. The other one was Africana studies. and I was sitting in an engineering class, and all of a sudden, I was kind of like drifting away and thought, all of a sudden, the dream came to my mind. And for the next 24 hours, I felt like I was downloading information. Like I thought I was going to go mad. A lot of other symbols started to make sense. A lot of keys, it was like that key unlocked other things. So I felt if I didn't share this, I'm going to go crazy. And I found out that the more I shared, the more I received. So, I was writing different articles. I had actually, to be honest with you, the genesis of TheIgboCyberShrine even starts before Igbo Corner Radio. It starts with Wikipedia. A lot of the content on Wikipedia, I actually wrote.
Okay, yeah, I remember you telling me that, yeah.
You can actually, it's not something I brag about. Sometimes people have tried to argue with me, and I'm like, I wrote that, right? I just don't brag about it. My brother, Akabundo, also, he was actually the first one to do it, and then I joined in. So I've actually, I started writing articles on Wikipedia, and then I decided, with this newfound information, I started to write articles on my own, because with everything on Wikipedia, there had to be a fact, like there had to be a reference somewhere. You couldn't, if for high quality articles, there has to be some reason that you put something on the site. So I started to put down things on Wikipedia that there was a reference. However, the insights that I was getting for TheIgboCyberShrine, a lot of times it was kind of like a metaphor, breaking down a metaphor, what this particular thing really is and whatever. So for instance, on the Ikenga Wikipedia page, I had to say exactly what Ikenga was according to what was written. But on TheIgboCyberShrine, I can say, if you actually analyze it, Ikenga is your self-image, but it's like your divine, your high, your higher self-image, right? Not your lowly. This is like of your potential energy made kinetic, right? Is what Ikenga is supposed to really represent. But such a thing can't go on a Wikipedia page.
Right.
Because
I got it from the gods,
Yeah.
Source.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
So in essence, that was why I basically stopped. I wouldn't say stop, because I do make some occasional edits here and there on Wikipedia, but most of the energy has been in TheIgboCyberShrine, because I can mix reference with insights, and also invite other people to just speak their heart's desire. And I've had a number of different guest authors, some who had their own blog, some who don't. And my blog is actually probably the best way that they've gotten their message out. Like the author of Magic Leopards of the Magical Dawn, he's actually authored a couple of things on TheIgboCyberShrine.
Yeah, I've seen his articles. Of course, I've seen just like the collaborative efforts. I've put a few videos up, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And so forth. So it's nice that it's very literally a cyber shrine, because I think that one thing that gets lost in translation is how a lot of the shrines function. And a lot of the Irish functioned, and in a very literal sense, they were knowledge centers, right? They were knowledge centers in ways that different people would come and contribute. Like a lot of people would come and leave their alpha there, or leave an ancestors alpha if they're like a venerator, that type of thing. And that is a means of preservation and passing down information and so forth. So in a very literal way, they were libraries and collaborative efforts.
I totally get that. I mean, we see today at statues, people like, leaving offerings at statues, or when someone passes, like on the street, they'll have like a street memorial, like having pictures and stuff of them.
Absolutely. And one thing you do very well, because we have a lot of conversations, is one thing you do very well is you're able to tie the connections between what was done then and what is done now. Because something that I personally like to emphasize is that the world really hasn't changed as much as people think it has. No. I think that the colonial experience, and then just us as a people dropping the ball, created this situation where we think, oh, that was the world then and this is the world now, and there's like a radical difference between them. But there are many Arishi that people build in the modern day. One would be a library, you understand? One would be, like you said, a statue. One would be, and when you start understanding what an Arishi is, right? It is a center for challenging or channeling a solar panel is an Arishi, right? And for channeling a certain energy or a certain power or a certain like insight or answers, that type of thing. Courthouse is an Arishi, so to do judgment, those types of things. Once you start seeing what these things were, or understanding what these things were, you start seeing that they're not gone. You understand? They've just been translated different just in time.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I think,
go
ahead. To respond to that, thank you again. I think one of the things that I have, people have said I'm very talented at is demystifying certain things, that when you actually break it down and have a better understanding, especially psychologically, right? Both individually and collectively, once you kind of understand how a process can actually work, a lot of things start to make more sense as to, why certain things were done in a certain way at a certain time and so forth. Like I said, we're having a conversation, and the conversation was about navigation. And I said, a person who was traveling before GPS, you would pretty much need to have, especially at night, how would you know what direction you're going? And yes, you have some landmarks, so mountains and stuff would help, but what else? And it's like, well, knowing how the sun, the sun rose in the east and set in the west, would help. Knowing certain stars, that this is the North Star, those kind of things would be really helpful. And having knowledge of, the moon, right? And okay, moon cycles. The moon changes every 28 days. So every time you see a new moon or full moon or whatever, 28 days have passed. You keep record. So some of these things that seem kind of mundane now would have been vital information to people back in the day. And if you're the one who's leading the tribe, right? And you kind of have to have some of this knowledge. This would be very sacred knowledge that we take for granted today because we have maps. Because we have GPS. But yeah, so some things, right, being kept secret, like the way to go and smelt iron, right? Well, if this is the main way that people are keeping the village, this is the village industry. You have to, it's almost like a company town. This is a Ford town, right? And if you spill the secret, then GM gets it. Oh, you're in trouble. You're just empowering a competition. So you tell your people, if you go and get dedicated to the blacksmith guide and become an Uzu or blacksmith, you're sworn to secrecy. You can't say anything unless penalty of death. Not only penalty of death, your own descendants will be cast out. This is serious. Like, we can't afford to have anyone spill these secrets. But once you start to realize that was their non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah.
That was their
the NDA.
That was their patent system. This is ironclad.
Yep.
Yeah, you will lose a lot if you spill the secrets, because we don't want everyone knowing. If we're the only game in town for 100 miles that knows how to smelt iron, we don't want anyone else infringing on this.
Right.
This is really important. So once you start realizing stuff like this, it's like, oh, you get it.
It's that simple, and then another thing I always say, especially when I talk to patrons and subscribers, people who ask me questions and things like that, is that Odinani is not something you believe in. It's happening around you, whether you believe it or not. Now, it may look different in your community, in the Ani or the Allah that you're in, right? But it's happening around you, whether you know it or not. Like one of the examples, like the video I'm working on right now, will probably be out by the time we release this, is the All-Fall video. And, a lot of people will look at the All-Fall and they'll be like, okay, if you touch the All-Fall, you've agreed to X, Y, Z, and it's a binding oath and so on and so forth, And you may look at it like, okay, like this is something, something that kind of like an old world thinking type of thing, but what is the magic of signing your name on a contract that makes you believe deep inside of you that this is binding, but you know what I mean? That type of thing, putting your name on a piece of paper, all of a sudden, oh, I said I'll do this thing, now I got to do yada, yada, that type of thing. Leases for apartments, mortgages, all these things, any major decision you make in society comes with the signing of a contract. You understand? Just like the way our ancestors, every single major decision you made came with the swearing on the awful, that type of thing. You know, so when and the thing is, what is valuable about the ancestral way, in my own opinion, is that you said something earlier about the modern world. Because the modern world is so compartmentalized, there are a lot of things that we as people don't encounter naturally. Like most of us will not govern our society, right? Most of us will not fight a battle or go to war, that type of thing. So there's a way that our ancestors, while a lot of these things are the same, there's a way that our ancestors were aware of things. The average person was aware of things that we today are not aware of. I'm not of the opinion that people have gotten smarter, right? I think the system has gotten smarter. I think people have been more compartmentalized and organized to operate on a bigger scale. But I think if we compare somebody back then and what they knew operationally and somebody now and what they knew operationally, there'd be a gigantic gap. Right? I've killed an animal one time. You understand? That type of thing. But like just those basic things, you know, some of us have never seen the organs of an animal after it got killed, you know, and that type of thing. So somebody with that type of knowledge would have an easier time figuring out how to do surgery than us who need to go to school for 12 years because we haven't seen these things in real life and then go experiment on a cadaver and so forth. You know, So I think that learning the ancestral way is almost like a shortcut into creating that holistic knowledge so that you can kind of take ownership of your world and society. Because in the world today, the individual doesn't have ownership of their society the way they did back then. You know what I mean? So hope that makes sense. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, the way we met was my sister had actually recommended I reach out to you. Can't remember exactly what it was for, but you were in a group, Young Fly or the Young Igbo group or something like that.
Young Fly Igbo.
Too. Yeah, everybody was in there at one point. And she was like that you were a member of a certain society in Igbo land. You understand that you went and did a full initiation and everybody was surprised and so forth. And so I wanted to ask you, what is the story of that and what was that about?
So I happen to be a member of a group called Ekpe Society. Is known by that name in Nigeria, but in different places is also known as Engbe, Conco, in Cuba, Abacua. So it's still the same group under different names. So I happen to be from Arochukwu, which is in Abia State, and I joined in 2012.
Okay, and let me take it even a step further back because there had to be something that led you to make that jump, and it's very, very uncommon. Like it is common for people in our generation to get the Ikbeze, like the regular chieftaincy title that is not attached to anything except the Eze of the community, but the quote unquote, the original titles to go back and get your Ikbe and your Nze and your Alzal is very rare for people in our generation. So I kind of want to go back a little bit and ask you, what is your history with Odinani and how did you arrive to the point that you are in today? And you can go as far back as you want to.
As far back as I want to is me being born, because in my honest opinion, I kind of feel like you're naturally born with your spiritual gifts, right? You know, a lot of times people talk about their spiritual awakenings in life. I think actually we all are awakened spiritually when we're born, and what happens is that the world kind of pulls us to sleep. So it's so like the Matrix in reverse is what I actually feel happens. All of us are the one, and by that I mean all of us, because the one is who is fully awakened and can even control stuff in the Matrix. And I feel like that's actually our natural state. And if you observe children, you'll see that they're directly tapped into the source, but they unlearn stuff that they intuitively know. So honestly, my history with Odinani starts at birth and then continues with society basically telling me what I should be seeing versus what I am seeing, right? Seeing some things that shouldn't be there. But society, society, no. This is those are hallucinations, right? These are hallucinations or whatever, right? Starting to have certain thoughts, but you can't say that out loud because children are supposed to be thinking like that and asking these questions, asking questions about, oh, why did this happen? Why did that, and you're getting much further than the adults really want to go. You're going down a rabbit hole, and it's like, most kids aren't asking these questions, so you kind of learn, all right, there are boundaries. So you keep these thoughts and questions to yourself as well as the experiences, right? But then over time, right, you start to study. And when you start to study, especially learning about your own people and their own belief system, now your experiences begin to make a lot more sense because you realize that it's not even something like you and I had this conversation about Odinani being something you have to join in the eyes of some people. It's like, yeah, you have to join Odinani. It's like, no, there's no joining it. It's kind of like,
Initiation, right? Yeah.
yeah, that's not how. In fact, I don't think that's how any actual African traditional system truly works. I think
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
I think people are selling these things, right, for monetary purposes and
Yeah.
creating an illusion that that's the case. But it's like, no, it's not something that you have to join. You just have to, more than anything, be yourself. Because who you are and then who you're pretending to be a lot of times are different. For a lot of people, they're different. But I think if you just actually be yourself, because being yourself, I remember when we were having, I think the last medicine show, when we were talking, I think
The
somebody
group
had,
chat, the
yeah,
Patreon group chat. Yeah.
yeah. I think a question that came up about the inner child, and I said the inner child was actually the first subpersonality well, the first personality that you actually developed. That there's theories that human beings, I think Jung, he either pioneered it or he really promoted it. But the whole idea is that we are actually a complex of several subpersonalities, and that collective the collective of all the subpersonalities, we call Derek, we call Onyemobi, we call Amanda, we call whomever, right? But it's really multiple um, subpersonalities that sometimes you can regress. Certain things can make you an early subpersonality, such as your inner child, which is the first one that gets developed. Right now, there are things that can bring you back. That's what nostalgia is for. Nostalgia builds on, oh, this thing that you loved, when you were 4 or 5. Since you were 4 or 5, you've always liked this thing, and now when you can actually sit there and watch it, you can watch it with your child and have some of those same feelings because that inner child, I think he called it the eternal child, what people call it the inner child, that is still a part of you, and it's always going to be a part of you until you pass away.
So for you, the journey, of course, begins before birth. Even it's something that you were brought into the world to do. I
Yeah.
feel very much the same way. And the thing is, a lot of times, and you said it as well. A lot of times, it's a matter of remembering, right? It's a matter of just like, oh yeah, I don't like that. That kind of thing. I'm not that kind of person. I'm actually this kind of person. That type of thing, or whatever. So yeah, no, that's big, man. Um, the another thing I wanted to ask you, right, was as far as your journey went. So you always had this thing in you as a child. I'm sure you met some resistance, being that we're dealing with Nigerian people circa probably the 90s, I'm assuming, that kind of thing. So I wanted to ask you, did you face any resistance, or was there anything that kind of stood in your way of just actualizing that person that you knew you were from the original child?
Well, truth be told, there wasn't anything that stood in my way as much as myself you know, feeling brave enough to express, what was in my mind, what was in my heart, and send a message loud and clear. I think I told you before that um, if you had asked me, or it was you or somebody else, right? I think it was someone else. Who knows? The key thing is that um, if I had been told 2 years ago, right, that I would be giving talks on Odinani and Igbo culture, wearing unzu and everything,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have believed in myself. I would have been like, me?
Same here, man.
No,
Yeah,
yeah,
same
no,
here.
no, no. Because when you're wearing unzu, you're sending a message. That's a very, very like across Africa. I've actually come to see that you don't wear it and act goofy. You don't wear it and act silly. You're wearing it for a particular purpose, for something that people deem as sacred. You see warriors, they wear it. Well, how do we treat military people? Military people, right? In uniform, they have strict codes of conduct. There was actually recently a military person who actually got dismissed because he expressed a political opinion while in uniform. He released a book about something going on in society, and that was actually fine. That was actually fine. But when you put on that uniform, you cannot misbehave.
Right.
They're very extra strict with that. And in a lot of ways, Unzu for many African peoples, we call it Inzu, but this is the general term for white chalk. I actually found out that our the Africans who made it to Cuba, they didn't have Inzu there, so I think they actually use crushed egg powder, like egg shell powder.
Oh,
Like they'll
okay.
get, yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, see, this is the power of substitution.
Interesting.
They
Yeah.
didn't have one thing, so they used something else as a substitute.
No, yeah, the Caribbean and the diaspora, North
Yeah,
America, South America,
yeah,
they're testaments to that,
yeah.
in the different systems and so forth. So as far as, okay, being able to step out and have that boldness to be able to do what you're doing now, you jumped into this in the way that you're doing it very early. Like you said, even before TheIgboCyberShrine, you had something going on. Have you noticed the difference between the reception then and now? I know you hinted a little bit on it earlier.
Yeah, I think what really happened more than anything is that me and my brother, we were ahead of our time because Igbo Kwenu Radio, I forgot exactly when we started it, but I do recall it ending around I think it was around 2010, we ended it. And so it ran for, a few years, but it lost steam. And now I feel like if we did it all over again, it would be enormous because the connects that I have, I mean, all these various Igbo books, like I had Dr. Nedio Kaurafor. I had her on there. She's there. I interviewed her before she became, she's practically a household name in some circles. She is the famous African futurist writer, not Afrofuturist. This is something me, she's a personal friend of mine.
Yeah, yeah,
She does not write Afrofuturism. She writes African futurism. But
yeah.
she is interviewed on TheIgboCyberShrine from way back in the day.
Cool, cool.
Not TheIgboCyberShrine, Igbo Corner Radio, right? So that's
Awesome.
there,
Yeah.
right? And also Douglas Chambers, who wrote Murder in Montpelier. We had a lot of very interesting conversations with various people. And if yes, it happened today, the interest level back then was mostly older people. Interest
Interesting.
level for now it would be older people and younger people. The younger people finally came on board. It took them a long time, but they finally realized that our culture was more than just wearing, colorful clothing and dancing and eating. For a long time, that's where so many people were. But now people are asking the question, why? The why do you do this? Why do we do that? What the customs actually are, and they're finding out the resources are available.
Available now. What do you think is causing that? Because it almost feels like like a switch was hit and everybody just flipped like probably the same month. So what do you think is causing that?
I think it's been an avalanche, right? Because I
Yeah,
think it's like, okay, just like you said, somebody doing something, right? And a lot of people may be interested, but they're not saying it out loud. And then somebody says or does what other people want to say or do, and it gives them permission to do it. So I think it's kind of like, oh, well, this is TheIgboCyberShrine that's coming out here, right? Oh, this is the medicine show. Oh, there's these Twitter accounts that are saying these things, and so more and more people are basically expressing their truth, right? Being themselves, just being their authentic selves. And as that is happening, people are now getting attracted to it because when something is authentic, when it's real,
yeah.
it's gonna appeal naturally. This to me, right? Like Star Wars, right? Star Wars, the Harry Potter series, just there's some the Lord of the Rings. Some of these stories, I think the archetypes in them, they're so deeply embedded in us that, however, we're telling the same stories over and over again, and we just can't help it because it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
And whenever we see it, we automatically. Game of Thrones is another one. Some of the archetypes in that show is like this. These are primal archetypes that when we just have whenever they're expressed, we just have to respond to them. We have no choice. So I think that's what it's been like an avalanche, a snowballing effect of a small amount of interest because there's a small amount of content makers, right? And as more content is being produced, there's more interest.
You know what is really interesting too is you had spoke earlier. And I mean you've told me about this before, but the dream you had and the symbol you were given. So when I made my Insibidi video, the Insibidi explained video, I had two other people reach out to me, right? And they both said the exact same thing, but they had different types of symbols or different single symbols. And what they told me was they had a dream. There was a woman that showed up. They think it was Anna, or they think it was Anna, but they don't know, and or it was an older woman, and she gave them a symbol the exact same way your story went. And as these emails and messages are coming in, I was just like, wow, so I think even on the beyond the terrestrial level, I think there's something going on. I don't, if you want to call it a cosmic tide or what, but there's a way that the not just the interest, because there's always been an interest in Igbo culture amongst like Igbo people or even people in the diaspora, but the desire to dig way in and completely immerse and go beyond, I guess, lack of better terms, the more face value aspects of it, like, okay, going to weddings and that kind of thing. That thing has skyrocketed beyond. And so when I got those two messages and they matched your story, I started kind of really thinking about what's actually going on a wider scale. You know. But I wanted to ask you though, one thing that you do emphasize, because as this current, as we're all moving in this current, you and I have spoken about the dangers of, people, I guess, coming to take advantage of it, you understand, or coming to, see what they can scoop out of the well and that kind of thing. And I wanted to ask you, because one thing you emphasize is like verifiable information, right? You always want to be able to verify yourself. And, I'm of the same school. I'm of the same school of thought. So I wanted to ask you, what is the importance of that? And why do you think, because we encounter this a lot with a lot of African studies, why do you think there's such a disconnect a lot of the times when African studies are being discussed with the process of verifying? A lot of people, just make claims and just run with it, and it becomes a whole movement and that kind of thing.
I think there's one particular problem that people have when they're trying to understand African people, and this includes other African people, is the way we tell stories is not actually meant to be factual. When you hear Nigerians tell a story, it's going to be exaggerated. and it's gonna
Oh,
be an
and Maggie.
exaggeration. It's gonna have an exaggeration for the story to travel, right? By the time it gets to you, the further away it comes, it's gonna become a lot. Like it's like people adding ingredients to the story, right? So by the time it gets to you, a fight that involved 10 people becomes 100. Something that cost $1,000 now costs 50,000, and so forth, right? So the tales grow over time.
Yeah.
So a person who did an average man or woman who did, you know, you know, uh, did a great thing, right? I'm talking about this was before this great thing they did were average, and now they did a great thing. Now this person becomes born of a demigod. This person is born, like they
Yeah.
deified them afterward. Like,
Yeah.
there's different stories. I don't want to give any particular name because I don't want to
I heard a
offend.
story where somebody pushed Nnamdi Azikiwe out of a window and he turned into a fly. So we're
Nnamdi Ezekwe holds the keys to the Lagos Lagoon. There was a great monster. He apparently there's this myth of him defeating a monster or something that lived in the Lagos Lagoon.
Really?
Yes. There's esoteric. Listen. If you are an African person,
Yeah.
if you happen to be an African person, but in particular a Nigerian person that that did something great, the gods were with you. It's all
Yeah.
whatever happens when the story is told later. So, for instance, Eronsi, General Eronsi,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Agoiyi Eronsi. I love to say his name Agoiyi because that name is a very strong name, right? So
Yeah.
General Agoiyi Eronsi, right?
Yeah.
General Ironside. He apparently he was a very massive guy, right? He was the military commander of Nigeria
Yeah.
for 6 months. Don't want to get into what happened to him. But he apparently had a swagger stick called Charlie, right? It was a crocodile stick,
It's a
right?
crocodile. Yeah. Yeah.
And apparently the myth around this man was that as long as he held Charlie in his hand, he could not be killed.
Yeah. I've heard that. Yeah. I've heard that.
That even
Yeah.
he was in the Congo, right? He was in the
Yeah.
Congo, and they were shooting at him and everything. Like, he got away, but as long as he held on that stick,
Yeah.
he was still alive. So apparently they had to make sure that they removed the stick from him before they killed. So we don't even know that whether that thing was true or not. The key
Yeah.
thing is that there's a claim
At
that
this point, I
now,
don't honestly. At this point, I don't doubt it. If I hear something, I'm willing to take it in. Fine,
yeah,
let's take it in. If it's not true, it'll reveal itself not to
yeah,
be true.
yeah, yeah,
I don't doubt anything anymore. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so so now I'm pretty sure, give it a few decades or maybe a century or two, Fela. How Fela died is he will probably ascend into to the sky from the
Oh,
stage.
they started with Fela. Yeah, yeah, yeah. A
Yeah,
couple of
so
things have started with Fela.
you've seen this. You've seen this already. Literally already has. They've already started to deify him.
Yeah,
Already,
yeah.
this is a guy who died in our lifetime.
Calacuta Republic. It's an Irish. It's a shrine.
Yeah, yes,
You
it's
know?
called the
Yeah.
shrine.
It's
Yes.
called the shrine.
So
Yeah,
you see that when people really like you,
yeah,
right? When they really like you, they're gonna you're gonna ascend
yeah.
in their mind. You become half person, half spirit. When
Even in
someone
my
is
own community, I won't
yeah,
say who. I won't say who, but there's somebody who's alive right now that there's a story that he walked on water. So
yeah, yeah,
but yeah, no,
different
that's
things. Yeah,
yeah,
this is what we do for people in our own lifetime. So the different events, whatever the case may be, this is how we are. And so if you understand that, you pull different elements from the story and try to decipher what really happened, right?
yeah, yeah,
That's what you do. But if you want to go and now find verified things, the rituals, right? The different masquerades, the action items that what do people actually do, right? What do people actually do can be verified because a lot of stuff that they did back in the day, they're still doing today.
right, yeah,
And it's like,
yeah,
okay, so get into that. If you're not, and if you're saying something, right? that doesn't correspond with something that's in a group of people's natural environment. It's probably very suspect. It's like, okay, well, you're saying that they did this, but where would they do this in this kind of environment? Why would they do this in this kind of environment? You know, if you're talking about a group of people that they migrated from thousands of miles away, well, how did they know how to farm? To be able to farm in that environment, you had to have been, native born. You can't just show up there from somewhere else and just start
Some
farming.
type of prior exposure, yeah.
Yeah, because especially farming, yam and cocoa yam, these other things, those were very specific, and those were not easy things to farm.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, you know, one thing I think you and I discussed this, and with the Odinani group chat, we talk about this all the time, is the fact that the culture itself, right? Like people say like, oh, African history wasn't written down, blah, 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 blah. I really fight against that notion, because it's not written down in the sense that it's collected and put away somewhere and that type of thing. It is lived. The history is lived. There's a reason the masquerades come out. At the time they come out, they walk the way they walk, they look the way they look. You and I have sat there for hours just decoding different masquerades. One thing that, I mean, I'd actually like for you to share it. One thing that you revealed was with a lot of the masquerades, if you pay attention, they're actually wearing camouflage. And another thing that's interesting is a lot of the ones that are wearing camouflage, those are the ones where if they're coming out, you run. So I wanted you to kind of go into that, because it was a really interesting revelation.
There was one teacher that I had who said to me that the masks are testaments, right? There are holy books,
Yes, yes.
and in my opinion, I think that idea was very, very on point. I've looked at some masquerades and it's like, wow, this is sending a very powerful message, right? If you actually get past the entertainment value, this is telling you a lot, especially, hey, hey, what it makes you ask questions. Well, why would they wear what they're wearing? Why? And around where? So, for instance, you mentioned the camouflage. It's like, okay, people back in the day did not fight with uniforms like we have today, right? In terms of warfare, most warfare would have been what we call bush warfare, right? So if you are fighting in the bush to this day, you wear camouflage. So since they already weren't wearing uniforms, they were wearing, clearly they'd be wearing bushes and other things that make them blend in with their environment. And we have, you and I have had these conversations, and I'm like, if a person wore something that blended in with the environment so well, they disappeared into it. But now all of a sudden, this person is firing arrows. This person is doing whatever, killing the opponents.
Yeah.
The survivors would say, "We got attacked by an invisible enemy."
Yeah, we got shot by the trees.
Yeah. Well, that's what it was. That's what it would look like.
Yeah.
It wouldn't look like it, because if you blend in with your environment, you will look invisible, right? So just stuff like that, it starts to make sense why people had the kind of stories that they had. You see the masquerades of people walking on stilts. It's no coincidence that those are waterborne areas. And even to this day, people use stilts to cross over rivers and marshes and, places like that. So there's a practical purpose to it. And in some places, they used to fight. They used to actually train on how to fight with stilts, which would be amazing to witness if you sit there and think about it.
Right. One of the things that I was able to see too was that there was a masquerade in, I want to say, Gabon, and not remembering the culture off the top of my head, but it was in Gabon. And I remember that because I was looking into this particular plant that was anti-malarial. And so I was also looking at this masquerade at the same time. I don't know if the research correlated somehow, but I saw that every single thing on that masquerade was from this anti-malarial plant. And now I look and see, okay, what's the story of this particular masquerade? And it says that these represents their ancestors when they arrived into the land, right? I'm like, okay, that's interesting, because if you look at the Gabon area and the known history, it would have been a part of the places that were contacted during the Bantu migrations, right? And if you've read the book Guns, Germs, and Steel, or just if you know ecology very well, moving up and down on a map is extremely difficult because as you're moving, you're going into different climate zones. If you're going to different climate zones, you're exposed to diseases you've never been exposed to before and that type of thing. So the fact that their ancestors arrived in this place and they were fortified with this anti-malarial plant was communicated very well in that. The masquerade was also covered in raffia, and I think we've had the discussion that before cloth, people were wearing raffia.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm even looking at the masquerades in your background.
Yeah.
Same thing, and it looks like they're carrying arrows. They look like warriors. They're wearing raffia, so this is representing something that's older
Yeah.
than old, that type of thing. So when you
Hmm.
look at these masquerades, you'll see that the history is actually written there completely, and it's
Yeah.
very similar to how today you can watch a movie about Martin Luther King and you can know what happened. Almost better than reading a book,
Yeah.
almost better than reading a book because it engages more senses, that type of thing. So it's really interesting. So
Hmm.
you have taken your knowledge and your approach and you have distilled it into what you call the 13 steps. So I wanted to ask you, what are the 13 steps and how did you come about forming them?
So what happened is when I started Odinani, or the TheIgboCyberShrine, it used to actually be called Odinani Laws of Nature, but as a that's too much, so I just said, yeah, yeah,
Well, it's not
yeah,
like
it was,
cyber shrine is like letting your foot off the gas,
yeah, but it's this TheIgboCyberShrine versus oh, how do you even spell Odinani? If I
Okay,
say
okay, okay, I
go to
got you.
TheIgboCyberShrine, yeah. So
Yeah,
just wanted to make it shorter. I started. I was getting the same questions over and over again, right? How do I get started? And I would give the same answers, right? So then I thought about it. One particular problem that people have, in particular with Odinani, but with other African traditions, is practicing them if you're not in the village, because
yes, yeah,
which once again, let's just use our brains here. If a particular set of traditions evolve in the village, right, they're gonna use what's around you.
yes, yes,
So
yes,
like you said about someone and organs, you go hunting and you have you can see the inside of an animal and you know where organs are. I mean, if you are in a village, then getting a goat isn't a big deal. Chicken eggs aren't a big deal. Palm wine, palm oil, all these different things are not like they're fairly easily accessible. Kola nut, inzu is in the ground. Like the items that they use are literally found all around them. So it makes sense that the documentation of a lot of things and the traditional form of a lot of these things are with common items. If you happen to be in Lincoln, Nebraska, in San Francisco, California, in Columbus, Ohio, and Bowie, Maryland, well, trying to replicate these things, right? Trying to replicate these traditions as they are described will be very tough. It's actually best not to try and do that. It's best to use what you have around you. If you can get a hold of some of these things, then sure. If you can't, don't beat yourself up about it. So basically, I wanted to figure out how Odinani could actually be practiced wherever you happen to be. If you did not happen to be in a village in southeastern Nigeria, how could you actually practice it in such a way that you can see some measurable, verifiable benefits to your life, right? So basically, me being born and raised in America, I was familiar with the 12-step program. I think Alcoholics Anonymous was the first one. They were the ones who developed it. But I realized that it was something that I think us as a society, not just America, but as a whole, we like numbered lists, right?
listicles, yeah.
So the four noble truths, the six pillars of Islam, the 10 commandments, the 42 laws of Ma'at, whatever you want to call it, right? Um, uh, 10, you have all these 10 steps to list, right? The 7 habits of highly successful people. So I said, I really did like the equality of the 12-step programs, because even though there will be someone leading it, they weren't like the supreme leader. And I didn't want anything that people could easily abuse. That's number one. And number two, I wanted it to be something that anybody could do. So different practices that captured the spirit of what Igbo people who developed these concepts were aiming at. So understanding what the intent was and learning how you can bring that into your life. So a friend of mine, when I was bringing this up and trying to develop it, said maybe you make it 13, because we have a lunar calendar, and so 1 step for each moon. And I said that's brilliant. So yeah, 13 steps developed from that, and I basically decided to release 1 step every new moon, and I did so. The 13th step just was released in August, and it was actually really fascinating because I did not have them all mapped out when I started. That's why I didn't actually announce what each one was going to be. So you would find out. You would find out the next step is going to come out, this new moon, but you wouldn't know what it was called. You just know the date it came out. And more often than not, I actually changed what was going to come next because of something that dawned on me as I'm putting it together. And as I'm seeing the reception to this one, I'm like, you know what? This step that I wanted to come later is going to come sooner, because I'm realizing that it's the need is actually, as because each one is supposed to tie in with each other. And as it was developing, I realized, okay, some of them needed to be in one particular order before another.
Nice. Yeah, no, I've been following the steps as well. I'm a part of the our group chat we have for the TheIgboCyberShrine, and everything you're doing as far as the 13 steps specifically. I wanted to ask, just to show examples, that type of thing. So 2 of them that stuck out to me, they're all good, but 2 of them that stuck out were Nro and Ncheta. I believe Ncheta is 1.
Yes.
And I think Nro, and I'm off the top of my head, it has to be between 5 and 7.
Enroll should be 4.
Or oh man, I was close. So
Yeah.
so I want you to kind of just explain those 2. There were just 2 that stuck out to me, and there's others like all of those types of things were phenomenal too. But I want to talk about those 2. So maybe we start with Incheta.
Sure. So Incheta was step 1, right? And for step 1, I actually wanted people to, and I will tell you, I actually didn't have that step written until that day. I was really blocked, and I was panicking, honestly. Like, oh my goodness, this thing is supposed to come out today. I need to deliver it by the end of the day, but I still don't just have it. And then it dawned on me. I'm trying to take the first step. Why don't I talk about the first step? And when you start looking at and observing about the first step, no one actually has a conscious memory of the first step, right? But if you observe a child who's trying to walk, it is very, very, very astounding. And clearly, if you observe that, you know what clearly you also were doing. Because if you are walking, you didn't come out the womb walking. You were first crawling, and then you attempted to walk, and you fell. And you did it, and you fell again, and you fell over and over again. But that did not deter you. So eventually, you were successful, right? And I said, remember, try to remember that. And if you can't remember it, which you probably can't, I'm going to do it for you. Remember that feeling, because that feeling from wanting to make the first step and actually doing it did not go away overnight. You still had it as a kid, but over time, that same feeling, that thing that inspired you to make that first step, when you did nothing but crawl, but you decided you wanted to walk, and the thing that inspired you to do that didn't just go away overnight. You still have, a lot of us still have it, right? To make the first step in other areas. So getting into remembering, right? Because like I said, the premise of Odinani that I have observed and I say is the opposite that's preached in Christianity. Because Christianity, the doctrine of the original sin means that you are already soiled when you come into this planet. And this is, you can't argue with this. This is their own doctrine. The doctrine of Christianity is that people are already soiled. They're already messed up when they come into the world. The premise of Odinani is the opposite, which is you're already whole when you come into this world, right? Yeah. You're already in tune. Because what is the point of religion but to get you back reconnected with your creator, right? That in some traditions, being born makes you unclean, makes you trapped. Well, I'm saying no. According to Odinani, according to my own observation and inspiration, you are actually in tune with God, which we call China Eke, right? You're already born in tune. You're already born with the direct link. And what happens is you forget. And the purpose of Inchita is to help you remember. It teaches you how to remember that these things, a lot of these things are memorials, are reminders, right? More than anything, they're reminders of what you already know. So that was that point to get you started. And I say this is the base of everything. It's about remembering. Right? Because if you start, you start doing that. I'm not trying to tell you to become someone new. I'm actually trying to get you to unpack that piece of you that's still there, but is buried underneath a lot of other things, right? So that's in Chita. Now in Raw, the reason I moved in Raw, and Raw was I think originally step 8, but I had to move it to the front, and this is why. In my opinion, what a lot of people call spirituality is what other people will call intellectual masturbation. It's a lot of people who use a lot of fuzzy words. Yeah. They use a lot of fuzzy words, and they may even have some elaborate rituals. But in terms of actually producing results, I mean, I don't know. Right. I'm actually very skeptical of the kind of results that they're claiming that they produce. However, the reason that I put in Raw, which is dreaming, in the 4th spot, which is close to the beginning, is because, like in Chita, it's one of the hallmarks of not just Odinani, but of multiple traditions across the planet. A lot of people don't know that a couple of experiences in the Bible either occurred actually in the dream state or in a dream-like state. So, for instance, when God spoke to Solomon and told him, "Hey, what is it that you want?" And Solomon said, "Wisdom." That was in a dream. It specified right there that that was a dream. So you start to ask the question, how many other things did they not tell you were dreams, but maybe there were some clues that this was not actually happening in the physical, this was happening in the dream state. So if you can go and get the Supreme Being to talk to you directly in your dream, what else can you do? I feel like that portion is ubiquitous, not just in Igbo culture, but across African cultures. The dream, right? The dreamscape, and like learning in a dream, experiencing in a dream, even people getting initiated in dreams. That's a very and the fact that very few people were discussing that was very alarming to me, because I'm like, a lot of people that you say are oracles because they dream, they're prophetic dreamers, and those prophetic dreamers are usually the ones, like I think even the book of Revelation, I think that was actually a dream. It was a dream or vision. But what's the difference?
Right.
A vision is really just a dream that you have while you're awake.
I know that with, and you know this of course too, but with BBA training is done in the mind. It's done in dream, right? So there's often the experience of being able to tap into Akon, and then once you tap into Akon, being able to dream, and it's consistently, you know, all the different DBAs I've spoken to will say that a woman will walk me through the forest and will be showing me the meanings of these different plants. There's these periods of isolation where you reach the point where there's a blur between dream and wake, and then all of a sudden you start seeing the spirit that you're supposed to see that does the teaching. Then oftentimes there's the ekili that's done between the teacher and the student, where they're communicating with each other in the dream state and they're learning within the dream state.
Dreams play a very large role in our spiritual traditions, but they were noticeably absent from people giving advice. What I kept on seeing was money. Like, you know, if you want to solve a problem, go and pay someone to do something or to find out an answer. And I'm like, you know, you can before you go to bed, you can ask for dreams, or if you start collecting your dream journal, you can actually get the answers right there. Like, you dream multiple times a night, you just that you most of the time don't remember it. And but it goes back to step one, Enchita. If you start to now remember more of your dreams, a lot of your questions would be answered.
Yeah, you know, I think that the dream state is a place where you can communicate with the whole of yourself. And a lot of times things even beyond yourself and so forth. It's the neutral space. So even myself, before I make a decision, I always try to sleep on it. Because I always know that whatever I'm going to wake up with, whether I remember the dream or I see it in the dream or whatever I wake up with, that first answer I wake up with is going to be the true answer. You know, that's my own personal way of doing divination. So yeah, that's very interesting. So you and I have both noticed that there's a lot of art being created that's influenced by Odinani, and just to wrap things up, that's influenced by Odinani. And so we have spoken about this, what I've seen and what you're seeing as, and we've described it as well, as somewhat of like a renaissance or a rebirth and so forth, and the space that we're entering. So what I want to know what your take was that as far as it goes with arts and people applying these ideas and these perspectives into their actual life and their creative work.
Yeah. You know, back a couple of years ago, I was seeing the beginning of a renaissance, but it wasn't quite there yet, because at that point it was more just, you know, clothing. There's more people just wearing clothing, you know, and being proud of that. But now it's full-fledged clothing, art, music, like everything, and people being loud and proud, not just about an identity, but about the philosophy behind the identity, and not and openly, like I said, wearing Inzo on their face, openly wearing bells, openly, you know, having carrying a phone, whatever things that would have been common to people 100 years ago, hell, even 60 years ago. There's a lot of things, that were way more common more recently than people think, right? And people are now just being themselves and, you know, bringing it back. You know, I don't even think it's an imitation. It's like just being yourself, right? Definitely way more now than before, and I don't see that trend stopping, because, like I said, as more is produced, it's gonna raise interest. It's like a figure eight. You know, it keeps on feeding one another. More interest means more is produced. More is produced means more interest, and so I think it's just gonna continue growing over time.
Marubuchibe, yeah, as they say.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly. Man is God to his fellow man, and I think each of us, you know, like I inspired you, and then you start making the videos, and I watch some videos and I'm like, oh my God, like that's it. I start now change the things that I'm writing. So then you inspired me, and then both of us are inspiring these people here, but it's not a competition, right? No one is like, oh, because this person is making videos, oh, I have to start making compete with him, tear him down. No, no. If you're making videos, that's great. I'm going to help you.
Right.
And if I'm writing an article,
the way I always see it too is we kind of have like sometimes we have a finite mentality about things that pertain to Africa, right? So like if every single person that was just talking about Athens, let's forget about Greece, just the city of Athens, if every single person talking about Athens professionally thought that they were competing or beefing with each other, or that only one person, because there's one town, there's probably more people that talk about just that town, Athens, than there are people who are studying Africa on an academic level, period. You understand?
Yes, it's true.
So
It's true.
like,
Yes.
yeah, you
Yes.
know, if just that one time, forget about that. I remember when I was in school, I took a history book. I held the segment for France. It was like maybe say this thick, and the segment for Africa was like this. You understand? And France is one country, right? And is significantly younger than just about every culture in Africa, you know? So that kind of thing. So yeah, I never got into the mentality of things like there's just this massive well that we haven't even started with. It is so, you know, I want 100 other people to start making videos too. You understand? It's not that type of thing. Yeah. So it's good that that's also incorporated into this revitalism that's kind of happening and that type of thing.
Yeah, and honestly, above everything, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I honestly think that the stories are going to be what those are the most important element, right? Because the stories contain so much. There's so much to unpack from the stories, and I feel like we definitely need a promotion of some of the older stories, but also creation of some of the newer stories. The one good thing about Odinani and Igbo culture versus some other cultures, you know, you mentioned Athens, you know, ancient Greece. I love Greek mythology, but Greek mythology is not growing. It's, all they're doing is retelling old stories, right? Roman mythology is not growing. But guess what? Igbo mythology can grow.
Right. We're
We
still here.
can actually create. I've written a story, Amadioha Strikes. It's a very popular story. Lots of people are. It's Amadioha actually showing up in the modern world because guess what? I've met some people who've had some Amadioha experiences.
You know,
Like,
go ahead.
Yeah, like I'm talking about. They saw a white ram, just in fire coming down. Like these are people who this guy told me about this Amadioha experience. So if Amadioha can appear, Amadioha is not a being that just appeared to the people back in the day. No, Amadioha is a spiritual force that people can actually experience today. So I was like, okay, a person living in a city in America. What if Oha appeared here? Well, it would be a bit different than an appearance in Oweri or Nechia or Mahia. It's gonna look a lot different. How would he appear and look? And I wrote 2 stories about that, and that's actually the beginning of a couple of other stories that I'm gonna write of similar spiritual forces making their way into the modern world and how it will look like.
Nice.
So you're gonna say something?
Yeah, no. One, I don't think I've read the story. Is it on the Cybershrine?
Yeah, if you type in
Okay.
Amadioha Strikes, and then Amadioha Strikes Again. It's part 1 and part 2.
All
And
right, I'll
both
check
of
it
them,
out.
you'll love the resolution and everything, the imagery, because it's like, hey, this is a modern look at how this. Yeah, you have to see it for yourself.
Nice. Yeah. My favorite thing to see is when these things are incorporated into art, because ultimately that's what makes them last forever. That's what I was speaking to somebody else earlier. That's what really helps the ideas sink in, because again, art engages different senses that just someone saying it or just someone reading it can't. Except literature. Of course, you read it and it takes you
Yeah.
somewhere, that kind of thing. But I'm saying like academically. So, man, I really appreciate everything you shared. If the people that want to support what you're doing and want to check out some of the things you've mentioned, like the 13 steps, the Cybershrine, and so forth, what places can they find you? What are the what platforms are you on, and so forth?
That's a good question. So first one is, TheIgboCyberShrine.com. That's the main website. And then we're also on Facebook, and that one is Odinani, the Sacred Arts and Sciences of the Igbo People. And then also on Twitter, and the Twitter handle is, Igbo Cybershrine. So that's where we are. And 13 steps, if you type in 13 steps on TheIgboCyberShrine or 13 steps Igbo, you should pull them up. And you don't, for anyone who's getting into the 13 steps, you don't have to go and wait 1 month to do them. You do them at your own pace. If you want to spend 1 month on each of them, if you want to spend 1 day on each of them, if you want to read all of them in 1 day, whatever works for you is the most important thing. And so, yeah, that's it in a nutshell. But thank you so much for having me on.
For sure. The question I forgot to ask you was, what can somebody expect to happen at the end of reading or following the 13 steps?
I think what can expect to happen, I'll actually describe what happened to me at the end of completing it, because me completing it was a process too, and made me realize how complete I already was. That, this ability, writing a new article, a new independent article every 28 days was something I had never done before. But it's something that I actually could have done much sooner. I had that the ability to do it, something I've had for a long time. But, me making public declarations of the deadline ensured, if I told someone that something's coming out on a date, I cannot, the shame of not producing, of missing a public deadline, I couldn't do it. I had to show and prove, and I did.
That's all fun right there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, and it made me realize, well, if I applied that same process to other things in life, wow, I'll go very far. So in a nutshell, it just made me, realize, wow, the things that I'm capable of is just that it's about like moving in a particular direction, taking it more seriously, being more structured, following through. And also just the influence that I could have in a positively. Yeah, it was just wonderful. And I think anyone who takes it on and goes from beginning to end, you'll come to a lot of the same conclusions and realizations. You'll learn about you'll remember a lot more, and you'll also recognize the powers that you have inside you already.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's interesting how, and then there's a particular thing about Odinani and most philosophical systems in Africa, is that there's no rejection of bad feelings, right? There's no rejection of bad feelings. And it's interesting how you use the feeling of anxiety to fuel, you understand, and the let's call it the fear of disappointing people or the fear of judgment to fuel you to getting this thing done, and so forth. I know for me, with my own videos, I always have an anxiety attack right before I've got to start one, especially the audio. You understand? Because I always, for some reason, I always think I don't have enough research or information, or it's not good at that. And that thing fuels me to try to make it as good as possible, so that by the time it comes out, I'm like, oh, okay, it's pretty cool. And from there, it's nice. So that's one of the things I wish I can think of an Ilu real quick to emphasize how much our ancestors emphasize on that particular point. But the fact that the good and the bad, they're all energies, and the ability to use those energies to do what you need to do in the world and actualize the things that you were brought to actualize is really the roots of everything we're talking about. So
yeah. Before we go, I actually forgot to do this.
Yes,
I was actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I actually forgot. I brought an instrument called the ogene.
Hey, how did you get one, by the way? I'm looking and it's not happening.
I got it directly from Nigeria.
Oh man. Okay. All right.
Well, I wanted, one thing that I tell people, sound played a very large part in our spiritual tradition, right? I mean, the drumming is the obvious one, but also metals. The use of metals actually played a very large part. And churches in the West, bells play. The beginning, before our boxing match, between rounds, bells and whistles.
Yes.
Actually play a big role. you blow the whistle. The referee blows the whistle. The
Movement of
signal, different
energies.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. The school bell, the church bell. In the East is more so gongs, right? But but they're still having the same effect, right? So I actually had meant to go and play the organe, in the beginning, to open up our conversation, right? To say that it's the
Absolutely.
beginning,
Yeah.
and then also wanted to, now it's like saying goodbye, right? And it's like signaling the
Shut the
end.
thing down.
So when I actually do my prayers, there's actually a couple of bells that I ring.
Nice,
Just
nice.
as like as the beginning and as the end. And I encourage other people to do the same. There's nothing fun. There's nothing, people want to say some of these things are witchcraft, but they go to church and they're ringing bells at church. I don't understand.
Right,
Why is it
right.
okay to ring? Why is it okay to ring bells at church? This doesn't make any sense to me. So it's okay. Some people who ring bells and be praying, but
Yeah,
then if I ring this bell, I'm just ringing this bell just to say goodbye, hello, goodbye, right? I
right.
might even do it a prayer, but even if I was, so what?
Yeah,
What is wrong
yeah.
with praying?
Yeah, no, the stigma thing is bizarre because the thing that is often being stigmatized, that person will go, the person like saying stuff about it will do the exact same thing the next day, only they'll use something that was made in Belgium to do it, as opposed to something that was made at home, because that one's not evil and this one
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
that kind of, so
I mean, these same people who will go and attack someone who's wearing silver bells on their ankles
yeah, yeah.
will with Christmas. They'll
Jingle
have
bells.
someone and not just wearing, they're shaking the bells, the jingle bells. Dun, dun, dun,
Yeah,
dun, it's a
right.
certain melody.
Yep.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
We have masquerades that wear bells, but Santa
Mm-hmm.
Claus is a masquerade.
Yeah.
Santa Claus Santa
Santa Claus,
Claus
yeah,
is
is
literally
Irish,
a
see?
masquerade.
Yeah.
Yes, that dresses in red and white, and
100%.
this is truly amazing to me. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're okay with Santa Claus, but your own things are evil. Get
Yeah,
it
yeah.
together.
And it's not as if there's not a supernatural origin to Santa Claus either. It's
Yes.
not as if it was a completely secular concept. You
No.
know, I want to say the elves used to like tear kids apart or something, like, you know,
Santa Claus will punish you.
yeah, yeah,
Santa Claus will say, if you're nice, you get rewards. If you're naughty, he can punish you. So if you that's no different than Manwu. What we're doing
Well, the
is
funniest thing on earth is that you'll see in Nigeria a lot of people that would ordinarily disassociate from masquerades just because they want to, I don't know, do guy. You know, when it's American Halloween, you'll see them, you know, in Lagos, Happy Halloween, typing as they're starting to do Halloween parties now, all those different things. I remember one time we went to Ekeleke in my mom's village, and my dad had organized it because he wanted to bring back, because the church at that time, there was this particular pastor, I talked about it in one of my videos, he was going nuts. So a lot of the men in the community started doing things to push back, right? So one of the things he did was he said there's not going to be any Ekeleke that year. So my dad's like, okay, we'll see that. So we organized like an Ekeleke competition where all the different villages will bring their own, and then the best one is going to receive this big bundle of nice stuff and all that stuff. And I remember when he was telling, because, you know, this was kind of back in the day and stuff, and people didn't know about Halloween, you know, back and like in the village, you know, or a lot of people didn't know, let me say, I'm sure plenty of people knew. But I remember he was talking about Dracula. He's like, you know, we're here saying that these things are evil, but these are our brothers and sisters who are putting on this dance to entertain us and make us feel good and remind us of who we are and where we come from. But the people that you are trying to emulate, if you go to their land, they have a character, I don't know, he said it really dramatic. He's like, Dracula. And then everybody's like, right? That type of thing, you know? So it's funny how that works, you know, but it's just at this point self-enslavement, because I don't even blame colonists anymore. At this point, if you haven't got your head right in 110 years, then that's you're choosing to be that person. You know?
I mean, okay, I have no problem, right, letting people know how silly a lot of their objections are. As we speak, we have historical reenactments of different wars where people wear uniforms, accurate uniforms, and they fire blanks. Some of them fire cannonballs at certain places. This happens to this day. Reenactments. I mean, talking about people even wearing Roman, like ancient Roman stuff.
Yeah.
They do it. We celebrate it. We celebrate it.
Let's look at acting. Let's look at acting. If you look at Mao, and this is supposed to be the spirit of a great man from the past. They call it more. You understand? Okay, more. You understand? You look at Mao and you say, okay, that one is not, I'm going to avoid that one. And then you'll turn around and watch a movie about George Washington, Malcolm X, or you'll go to a play of Hamilton. You know, it's like, what do you think you're looking at? What is, are we not, is this not the invocation of a dead spirit? You understand? Kind of thing. So,
I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.
So it's I don't know if it's packaging or what, but like I said, after 110 years, if you haven't figured it out, you know, you probably don't want to. So
yeah, so I'm happy that our generation is open towards being who they are. Listen, I'm just this is who we are naturally.
Right.
We're just being ourselves.
At this point, I see you in this attire more than I see you in regular. You know, that kind of thing. At this point, you know,
yeah. This is exactly who we are, and the sooner we embrace it and stop trying to be imitations of someone else, and we're failing pretty bad at that. We're failing, and let's just be real. We're failing. We're not actually producing. We can't, no matter what, we can't.
Not like we're mimicking NASA, you know? We'll mimic some rappers. We're not mimicking NASA and all the good, like the great things that are being produced. So yeah, we're failing miserably at the imitation.
And it's like, be yourself. Just be yourself, right? I'm happy that more of our people our age and younger are open to just being themselves, and I ask that you continue to just be yourself.
Yeah, and hey, man, for as far as us in this Odinani circle and culture, you've been a pretty instrumental part in helping that happen. So I brought Aji to pay you your respects and to honor the work you've done, and to tell you, or to not to tell you, but to encourage you to continue fighting the good fight. I definitely think you've applied a lot of courage into breaking a lot of stigmas, and that courage, many of us have been rewarded by that courage, and those who have not been rewarded by it, once they encounter your work, they're going to feel the same thing. So, Kanye Yoji, Igato, Igade, Ise.
Dallin, appreciate it.
All right, man, definitely.
All right. Take care. If you need me to, since you can't find one, if you need me to bring mine for anything you want to do.
Well, I wanted to start doing them for when I do my streams. If somebody donates, I'll start. But I've been looking, and then like they're charging some childish prices.
Remind me. I'll take care of that problem.
All right, man. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. All right, bro. Take care.
All right. Have a nice day.